name's Perry Continente, and I am taking the position that protest votes hurt our democracy.
My name is Manny Valladares, and I am of the belief that protest votes are an essential part of our democracy.
So I definitely think that somebody would cast a protest vote because they see both candidates, both the Democratic and Republican candidate, as people who really don't represent their interests. And so I understand where that comes from, and that is something that people deal with. That's something that I dealt with in the last election.
Yeah.
Like, Hillary Clinton's voting history wasn't the best for me.
Yeah.
And I think that Donald Trump was a pretty repugnant candidate, so I understand where the need to cast a protest vote comes from.
Let's see. In regards to protest voting, I feel like it's very important for people to remember that for people to have the willingness to vote in the first place, I feel like is a very significant achievement, because we have one of the worst voter turnouts in all of the fucking world.
It's true.
All of the world. And what I feel is very important is the fact that if people are willing to make their voices heard, regardless of whether or not it's a protest vote or they're just voting into our two-party system. Although even then, I'd say, even if you do vote for if you vote for any candidate, regardless of the two-party system, if it's Donald Trump or it's Hillary Clinton, that can still count as a protest vote. That's not to say that just third parties or having an unfinished ballot is a protest vote as well.
That's true. There were a lot of kind of the Bernie bros who jumped ship and voted for Trump, kind of just watch the world burn sort of situation. Or
I mean, for that, I guess that's sort of where I disagree, because having met some of those people, I can sort of understand where they're coming from, because they have a very distrust and distaste for the system, and it comes a lot from the fact that people like Barack Obama push for major change and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at the point of time a recession, so many people expected an FDR style change for the economy,
New Deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead he just used all of his capital and just made it, in many people's eyes, made it go to waste. Mm-hmm. And as a result, that allowed people like Donald Trump to sort of come into the system. And I'd say that for voting for Donald Trump was pretty much a protest vote at that point, because it just shows the discontentness with the current system. People were fed up with people like Hillary Clinton and Ted Cruz, and just sort of what they embody as a two-party system.
I understand that, but I do think that a lot of the people, I think that it wasn't just Obama's economic policies. I think that there were a lot of people, in Trump's base, these aren't really people casting the protest votes, who were just that angry that a person of color was president. I think that that's where a lot of that comes from. I definitely think there were a lot of people who voted for Trump just kind of not expecting him to win.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A lot of those Bernie bros who jumped ship, totally not expecting Trump to win. It's, if you look at the odds and even leading right up to the election, it was treated like he had a very outside chance. And then obviously we are where we are. So.
Yeah, I mean it also has a lot to do with media coverage of things, mm-hmm. because if they would have, because they sort of tend to look at conventional voters, and mm-hmm. a lot of those people who voted for Trump were people who were just like any other sort of group of people, had a distrust in the political system and had never seen anybody that sort of that was an outsider pretty much, regardless, because there's some of those people had voted for Bernie as well, although it's not as big as most people think it was.
Yeah, it's a small group.
Yeah, that being said, it's still a portion that I feel portion of people that I feel we should talk about, because they obviously were interested in that populist messaging that both people had, and they were just sort of fed up with the current system.
Problem with this whole situation comes from, if everybody who has since complained about Donald Trump's presidency, if everybody who had the ability to vote then voted, Hillary Clinton would have won by a landslide. It was a very close election, and kind of the apathy, specifically in the left wing. The right wing tends to fall in line with whoever the candidate is, but the left wing has a tendency to kind of throw their hands up in the air and just be like, no one here represents us, no one here represents me. And I think in some ways that's commendable, in that they hold their candidates to high standards. But with the Democratic Party catering to as diverse a political subset as it does. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez's comment that somebody like Joe Biden would never be in the same party as her in any other political system is entirely true. So I think, especially the progressive left, and I think if Bernie gets the nomination in the primaries, there's a chance that kind of the center left, the corporate Democrats, the neoliberals are going to just kind of abandon him too.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a real failing of the left wing, and part of the reason why they've lost the last two elections that they've lost. You know, I think that's part of the reason why George Bush became president, and that's a large part of the reason why Donald Trump became president. Yeah. So these protest votes, just because somebody doesn't 100% represent you, the sad truth is that we're in a two-party system, and you need to vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. Well, at that point, those are like sort of like positions I'd sort of disagree with. Because when you look at both of those both of those elections that George Bush was a part of, George W. Bush was a part of, you had someone like Al Gore, who like it was like I'd say like he's not like a full on. He wasn't like in the center, but he also wasn't like a full on lefty. He was definitely like in between there, and you could definitely see that his message resonated with a lot of people. But you know, obviously it was like very controversial. Like in Florida, like he probably should have won. I'd say. Because like having seen like sort of information and like documentaries on it, it seemed very skewed, and it's very suspect when literally one of the candidates' his brother is like the head of one of like the major states, most important states in like the election, which was Florida and Jeb Bush. But even like another one like John Kerry, like that's sort of like the fears that many people have with Joe Biden is that even though like a lot of people think he's like capable of like beating Donald Trump, there's like this lack of enthusiasm surrounding his campaign that just like for like better or for worse, like okay, you might agree with him more than Donald Trump, but does he really entice you of causing any sort of significant change?
For me personally, whoever gets nominated for the Democratic nominee, I'm voting for. I mean, I think that another 4 years of Donald Trump would be disastrous for our country, and I think that there's such a minuscule chance that whoever cinches the nomination would do something to make me think this person is less capable than Donald Trump.
I mean, I agree with you in that sort of like point, but also, which is why like I sort of agree with protest voting, and like I agree with the spirit of it, is the fact that like a lot of people having like that sort of like level of complacency, like no offense, because even I have that sort of like level of complacency. It's like it's not something that's tolerable to them because for the longest time they've been like getting screwed over by like the system. Like there's people in like the Midwest who are like losing their jobs and they're getting shipped to China, and like having Joe Biden's not going to help because he's already shown a willingness to sort of send those jobs away, and Donald Trump's sending them away. So like at this point, like they're not really like. They're not getting helped at all. And then it also comes with the fact that part of the reason that so many people are interested in like Joe Biden is because of his like cultural signaling or like his appeal to like left people in regards to like race and like social issues. Even though like, it doesn't matter whether or not, like so same thing with Hillary Clinton. She was like very, or at least Hillary was like more so. Hillary was more so, and like she was very hyper focused on social issues, so much so that she tried to outweigh that towards her like very centrist policies, and there was like a lot of people who were like very interested in that. And like part of the issue with that is that you could like try to like hone in on a certain group of people and make yourself look more special than you are, but at the end of the day there's a lot of people that are still getting screwed over, and that's not going to get fixed by us just sort of like pretty much taking like painkillers to let the pain numb away as opposed to actually dealing with the actual issue at hand.
I do think that there's a core issue, and I think that core issue is the two-party system.
Yeah.
I think that as it stands in this country, that is the major problem, and I don't think that protest voting is the way is what's going to solve it. But just the idea that we essentially have two people to pick from. If you look at like how it works in many other countries, that's just simply not the way it works.
Yeah.
But that will take a longer time to dismantle. I don't really see a third party rising. I don't see the Libertarian Party rising. I don't see the Green Party rising. I mean, we're not going to see President Jill Stein ever. But I think that in the meantime, all we can do is vote for the person who is the least terrible.